What we're going to do now is we're going to continue in our Broken Signposts message series. Again, we're talking about these broken signposts. This goes back, if you haven't been with us for the first few weeks, to a book written by a theologian, an Anglican bishop for many years by the name of N.T. Wright. He wrote this idea that there are signposts all throughout the world, things that come up again and again and again and again in all cultures, all around the world, for all time, that point us honestly to God. But the problem is these signposts themselves are broken. They don't point perfectly. But what we say, the big concept is that the very presence of signposts, the fact that they're there, points us to the reality that there is a destination. There's something those signposts are pointing to. So the first week we looked at justice. And we said that throughout all of human history, there's been this, in every culture, drive for justice, to set right things that have been broken, things that have gone wrong. And that although we don't get it perfectly, I mean, look at the American justice system. Although I believe it is a great system overall, do we always get it right in the American justice system? I would suggest not. I've watched a number of documentaries where they're pointing out instances where, my goodness, we have just fallen way, way short in some of these places. But the fact that we have a justice system points to the fact that there's this longing for wrongs being set right, and this points us to a reality beyond ourselves, to a reality that there is a perfect justice bringer. And then second week, we looked at love. And honestly, we spent most of our time in a very familiar verse, John 3:16, which talks about how much God loves us and what that means, and what it means that he came to bring us eternal life. But we said that all around us, there's this yearning and hankering for love, and that points us again to the fact that there's this ultimate reality of love, even if what we experience as humans is broken so often. Last week, we looked at this concept of spirituality and how it's kind of grown up now in the last 100 years or so, this idea of being spiritual. Now, if you really trace it back historically, this idea of spirituality began with Christianity. You see the roots of that 2,000 years ago and how that affected the culture. But somewhere along the lines, culture eventually said, well, we can be spiritual, but we don't have to be religious. And when we're saying spiritual but not religious, really what that is, well, yeah, religious in general, but kind of specifically Christianity. And there's reasons for why that happened. But in our culture today, there's a yearning for spirituality that's been divorced from its roots in Christianity, its roots in authentic religion. But we said that even though that spirituality might not be pointing in the right direction all around us, the fact that we all yearn for it points us to the fact that there is something greater, that there is a spiritual thing, a reality about us that we should be pointing into. Are you picking up the theme, how the broken points us to the ultimate? Well, if you stick with us through the whole journey, we're going to sum this up in our 8th week, where we're going to look at what we call the perfect signpost. And we're going to see how all these things come together, and that's going to be our Easter celebration. I encourage you now, invite some friends, invite some family who need to know that there is a perfect answer to all of the imperfections in life today. There is a perfect answer to all the imperfections. And we're going to look at that when we get to it on Easter Sunday together. But this week, with all of that as kind of the foundation that we built off of, this week, we're going to talk about beauty. And I went in kind of typical, I think, dude fashion, and I was like, beauty, so good-looking stuff. All right, this could be a short message, right? Well, I was really kind of rocked with it when I started digging into it. And I'm going to quote a couple times here N.T. Wright from his book and his section where he talks about this idea of beauty, because I think he does a wonderful job of kind of reorienting maybe what we're thinking about. He says this. He says, we are all of us hardwired for beauty, searching for a deeper and richer meaning in a world that sometimes seems to overflow with delight, but at other times feels dreadful and cold. Beauty, the haunting sense of loveliness, the transient yet utterly powerful stabs of something like love, but something more and different as well. It's a pointer to the strange, gently demanding presence of the living God in the midst of his world. This just struck me as he was talking about and tracing where you find this idea of beauty in the Bible. And he was one of the, if you read his book, he indicates that there's not a ton of places where the Bible will directly address beauty. Like, beautiful is good. Like, there's not a verse that says that. But you look at what things are being described, and it's clear that the referent is beauty. And it does talk about beautiful things multiple times. But he's saying it shows that there's something deeper and richer that we look for, and that beauty kind of encapsulates this. Now, we find this in a couple places. I'm going to take two places where we find honestly, the Hebrew word for beauty. Now, there's a couple different words that can be translated beauty or beautiful in the Old Testament. And again, if you're not aware of this, the Old Testament of our Bible, the oldest part, the first 2/3 of our Bible, was written in Hebrew primarily, and we translate that to English. The New Testament was written in what for bonus points? Greek. Who got it? Was that you, Michael? You get the Jesus points. Make sure those are notated appropriately. So we're going to be looking at some Hebrew, or really a Hebrew word here. But before we get there, let's look at two places. First of all, quickly, Exodus 28. And in Exodus 28, there's this instruction God is giving to Moses, who's leading the Israelite people, on what to do in creating the vestments for the priesthood, for Aaron and his family, his sons. It says, you shall make holy garments. Now, mind you, that doesn't mean that, it's like, worn in jeans, okay, with the holes. Okay, that's not the different kind of holy, all right? Holy garments for Aaron, your brother, and look here, for glory and beauty. Let that sink in, because we're going to kind of wrap this back around in a moment. For glory and beauty. That's why these clothes for the priests are being made. They're holy, they're set apart, they're sacred, for glory and for beauty. And then he goes on, he says, you shall speak to all the skillful, whom I have filled with the spirit of skill. So people that are really good at doing this, that they may make Aaron's garments to consecrate him, to set him apart, to lift him up in this role. And what role? For my priesthood, for the priesthood of God. The reason these highly skilled, beautiful clothes were being made was to set apart, to sanctify, to lift up above the ordinary and the normal. Looking at it and saying, wow, that's something special. And we know what this is like. We have a very clear referent in almost all expressions of a particular thing that happens quite often in our culture every single day of every single year. We call them weddings, okay? There's probably weddings literally happening right now. And although, yes, we do certain things for the dudes and we put them in little penguin suit kind of stuff, there's actually TV shows all constructed around the idea of a particular article of clothing. And what article of clothing is that? The dress. Say yes to the dress, okay? That on this day, for this time, and as, again, guy's brain, stupid amount of money on a dress. But we do it because it is highly symbolic. It is setting apart. And let me tell you, I can remember, and it brings the ooey gooey tinglies back when I picture my wife walking down that row, or between the rows of chairs in that rose garden in a historic horse farm in Winchester, Virginia. This beautiful creature enshrouded in this dress. I can still picture it, right? It's still, that dress is still at our house now. Okay, I don't think we own any other clothes from, all that time ago, but that dress we own, right? Honey, how many times have you put it on since we were married? Oh, you've never put it on. Whatever. So we don't even wear it again, but we understand that this points to something significant. It's glory that it's putting out for that moment. That's what this is for. This is a highly valued thing that the Lord is calling Moses to do. Now look, we're going to hop over to Psalms. And in Psalm 96, we read this in the first few verses. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless his name, tell of his salvation. from day to day. Declare his what? Glory. His worth and value and splendor among all the nations, his marvelous works, everything that he does that shows off that glory among all the peoples. And then if we hop down to verse 6, where it kind of explains what does this mean? What does this glory, declaring the glory and the marvelous works look like? You have to understand it's because splendor and majesty are before him, strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. We declare the glory of God and we tell of his marvelous works because in his presence are marvelous, majestic, splendid things. It's strength and beauty. These are things that are highly valued because they sit in the very presence of God. Now, the thing about this word beauty, it's the same word for beauty that we saw in the previous verse in Exodus 28. And now, apparently, you guys already heard that we were going to be doing some Hebrew because you cleared the splash zone in front of me in the room. So oddly enough, the first 3 rows in the center section are completely empty. You've all swarmed to the sides. If this were back when I was leading youth ministry, I'd say, okay, everybody squish in now. Everybody squish to the middle. But, some of you are ornery on the side, and I know you'll ignore me anyway. So we won't do that. But yes, there is a word here for beauty. It's tiferet. Tiferet. Can you say that? Yeah, pretty good. All right. See, there's no so you were fine. Okay, you didn't need to be scared of the front row. But this word is, in both of those verses, was translated as beauty. But this word actually has a pretty interesting, what's called semantic range, how it can be translated. Here's that word. And you can see there on the side, this kind of breaks off how often this word is translated in different ways. This word is translated as beauty or beautiful right there for that red section. So about a third of the time. The rest of the time, it's all about glory or glorious or splendor or honor. And in fact, if you count them all up, this word, it's translated in the sense of that splendor and glory and honor 65, almost 2/3 of the time that it appears, it really is actually translated as glory rather than beauty in the Old Testament. So it's almost 100 times this word is used, and almost 65 of those, it's talking about glory. See, in the Hebrew mindset, there wasn't the same level of distinction between things like glory and beauty. For us, we talk about beauty as being attractive. When I said beautiful, I'm guessing the vast majority of you were thinking of something like a wedding day, right? And so, there's a pretty thing, whether it's a person or an object, but it's that aesthetics of it. In the Jewish mindset, it blurred lines with something much deeper, much more valuable. We say that the idea of beauty is only what? Skin deep. What really matters is underneath. But that's because we've created this division. We think of the aesthetics and those things as this separate thing from the real essential nature. And I think we're going to find something a little bit different. What I would suggest is that that this universal admiration of beauty, that throughout all cultures, beauty is esteemed. It points to the reality that beautiful things matter. And I think it points to them not because, well, if it sparkles, it's nice, right? That's not the big idea. There is a value to beauty that is deeper than skin level. In fact, Proverbs 11:22 has one of the, it's just an interesting verse. Some of you may be familiar. It says, like a gold ring in a pig's snout is a beautiful woman without discretion. Have you heard that before? Now, this is not picking on women. The idea is that you can be gorgeous, but if what is inside doesn't match, it doesn't make sense. It's counterintuitive. It's like putting a gold ring in a pig's... And remember, in a Jewish context, to put something nice and sparkly and pretty on a pig would have been not just silly, but it would have been offensive. I mean, you had nothing to do with those unclean animals. But this idea of beauty is that it should It should be, you can see it on the surface, but it should permeate down. It's not that beauty doesn't matter, which that beauty is only skin deep. The beauty should permeate down. I would suggest that the idea that beauty is only skin deep is a very false notion, a dichotomy we've created, and we need to see that beauty points or should point inward. And if what is reflected in the beautiful and the aesthetics doesn't match the interior, that is actually pointing to a brokenness that needs to be set right. Look here now how N.T. Wright kind of moves us from the idea that there is beauty and that God values beauty to what that means for us. He says, putting the larger biblical story together, we find several hints suggesting that one of the reasons that we yearn for beauty, and if we're honest, even guys, we all yearn for beautiful things. It's just what we, determine is beautiful. Sam, pick on you again. If it goes really fast and it's really shiny and you can show it off to your friends, is that beautiful? Oh yeah, okay? If you want to see his hot rod, talk to him. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, right? But now to somebody else, Pat, I mean, is a hot rod the most beautiful thing you can imagine? No. There's not even words dignifying it. It's just the shaking of the... There's different things that we all yearn for when it comes to beautiful things. We'll call different things beautiful. And we say that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and there's some truth to that. But the fact that we all yearn for it, that's that universal admiration of beauty, it's pointing us to something deeper. And here, what N.T. Wright says is that we were created in the very image of God. Now, if you've been tracking with us for a while, not this January, not the January before, but the January before that, January 2021. Do you guys remember our message series we started the year off with? Wait, did you? Oh, stop it. You're awesome, Gwen. Imago Dei, the image of God. We spent about, I think it was 5 or 6 weeks talking about the fact that all of us are made in the image of God and that this is one of the most profound theological truths that we can wrap our brains around. And yes, if you weren't aware, Gwen here in the room remembers my sermons better than I do, okay? She takes more notes on a Sunday than I have written down in front of me. It's amazing. All right, continuing with N.T. Wright, because he's also way smarter than me. The idea of the image has to do with reflections. Humans have the vocation of reflecting the power and glory, and we can say here in that Hebrew mindset, even beauty of the Creator into the world. That's our job. And again, we spent 5 or 6 weeks talking about that. He goes on and says this, to put it in somewhat grandiose language, and if you weren't aware of this, the Anglican tradition tends to like grandiosity and some flourishes, but he says it this way, the enveloping sense of the transcendent in the commonplace points to the living, loving, mysterious, and joyful Creator who made us in His image in order to look here. Why did He do it? To call us, but also to enable us to reflect His loving creativity into the world. Our job is to reflect who God is in His glory and in His beauty to the world around us, to appreciate that which reflects of Him in our world today. And this is a highly biblical concept. We don't have time to go back through it all. Remember, we spent 5 or 6 weeks walking through it. But look at this one place in Genesis chapter 1. And God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, to reflect us and to act like us. And this is the idea of God speaking in His majestic Trinitarian, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit essence. And He says, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, over the livestock, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. And as a side note here, catch this. I think God knew some of the things that would happen over the course of time, of history. And He says, male and female, He created them. From the very beginning, there was not to be a power play between the genders. Okay? That was never the intended order. Now, there are structures that God has put in place for how we can best interact together, but it is not a valuing one over another. And we have to shed ourselves of this dominion over, this fight over when it comes to gender, because we both equally in our genders, reflect the image of God, but we also do it collaboratively, meaning we cannot, a single gender cannot fully reflect the image of God. It takes male and female in tandem to fully reflect God's image. That's how he made us. But look here what he says. And God saw everything that he had made. And up to this point, he said he made the earth. Boom, boom, good. He made light. Boom, good. Hey, he made plants. He made critters. He made birds. He made all this stuff. Boom, good. But then here, after he makes humanity and makes him in his image, God saw everything that he had made, and behold, or boom, it was very good. Very good. Now, this word for good, this is a Hebrew word that is usually translated good, but guess what? That Hebrew word, it's a different one, but guess how that can also be translated? Beautiful. The sense of goodness can be considered beautiful. That is what he's saying. So in a sense, it's not directly saying beautiful here. Don't hear that. What I'm saying is this idea of goodness in the Hebraic mind of the time when this was written would include the sense of beauty being part of that. And everything that he made was very good. So I would suggest this, just like N.T. Wright already pointed out, looking here to Genesis 1, that beauty is supremely manifested, best, most gloriously manifested in the unique creation of humanity. Have any of you been to the Grand Canyon? Anybody? A few of you. Okay, I was there. Has anyone been to, I believe it's the Reagan National Library in Simi Valley? Anybody been there? Again, it's this big place in California, big giant rocks and all this kind of stuff. And at both these places, I was overwhelmed with the grandeur of what I saw. I mean, physically for me, I couldn't get my eyes to focus. It was so large and immense, I couldn't process right what I was seeing. That was beautiful. But I would suggest that even in that and all its grandeur and beauty pales in comparison to the beauty of what it means to be human, because we are made in the image of God. But even with all that beauty, there's a problem. Do you know what the problem is? Do you know what the problem with humanity is? Yeah, humanity, because we sin. Humanity messed up its own beauty when we introduced sin into the picture. And N.T. Wright, again, talks about this, talks about how beauty interacts here. He says, into our brokenness comes a God who seems to care deeply about beauty, a God who created the heavens and the earth to tell his glory, not because he needed us to admire the glory, but because the glory was a true outflowing of his own generous love. But look here, what's more, this God dares to whisper to us, even in the midst of our fractured world. Is it fair to say our world's a little fractured? A little broken? I would suggest that that's a pretty safe estimation. It says that we are created in his own image, what we already looked at, and that this God-reflecting vocation, the job he's given us of being in his image, can be and is being restored. It was given to us perfectly, and we broke it. Okay? And it's not exactly the same thing, but I picture it a little bit like this. I give my kids a beautiful gift, right? And within 45 seconds, what has happened to that gift? You did what with that? And you did it to your brother? And it's broken, right? And we have to kind of stitch it back together. And you know, it'll still work, but now it's got tape on it, and it doesn't have the full range of motion, and the arm of the transformer will just keep falling off and keep falling. I can get it back on, but it just keeps falling. So you can still use it, but not the way it was designed to. That's what's happening here. We were given this perfect reflection of who God was, and we messed it up. And now God is saying, it can be and it will be restored. He goes on and says, our human drive for beauty, for transcendent meaning, turns out to be more than we ever expected. It is God-given. It's the signpost designed to lead us back to his presence. Beauty should not be just makes us adore that thing in and of itself. As gorgeous as my wife was walking down that aisle, her beauty should point me to the God that made her in the first place. Because he did good work with that, okay? It should point us back to his presence, but we'll go, wait, but it ends in darkness and horror, right? There's death, the dust of death covering over the beauty in thick, choking layers of ugliness. Yes, N.T. Wright would respond, but see what the Creator God now does. He makes a way through death and out the other side into new creation, new beauty, and new life. If you don't know where this is heading, exactly where I said we're going to be heading on week 8. See, because of all the beauty in the world, it is stained by the corruption of sin and death and brokenness all around us. I mean, we just, as a church family, had a family that's connected virtually with us who suffered through the loss of a child, a young child who virtually all her life knew cancer. And while it was a celebration of the life that she lived, that was a life taken too soon. That was not what was designed. And although we can look and say, what a beautiful child, and Riley was beautiful, it's covered by death. But God provides a way through. He does not leave us in it. It's like me telling my kid, well, you broke it, deal with it, and walking away, right? That's not what God does. He provides the way through. And where do we see it? We're going to go quickly to John, kind of where we've been centering most of our time. The Gospel of John, who is writing about his experiences with Jesus. He says, in the beginning was the Word. And who is the Word here for those of you who've been around church for a while? The Word here means Jesus. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. That is a truth, church, for us to hold on to. It is so easy to think the darkness has won or is winning. And as dark as the darkness seems, do you know what happens to darkness the moment light shows up? It's gone. There's not a battle. It's not like, well, let's see who wins here, right? Let's see like some kind of cosmic kung fu fight. That's not what's going on. You flip the light switch on, and it is light. Do you want to know one of the weirdest things for me as a pastor? Is being in a church building at night. Because it's creepy. Why is this building so creepy when I'm here alone and it's dark? That seems weird. But do you know what takes care of the creep factor? You flip on the lights, and all of a sudden, it's the same place again. There's no more darkness, and all that creep has gone away. This is what happened with Jesus. Now look here, it goes on in verse 14 of John 1. He says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory. And remember how in the Jewish mind, that idea of glory and beauty, there was some interplay between it. So this beautiful God has shown up, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Jesus has shown up. He has dwelt among us. He has brought the light. The darkness has not overcome it. The darkness cannot overcome Jesus. If you remember where we went 2 weeks ago when we talked about love, we went to a very familiar verse. Just a couple chapters later, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Not just life that goes on without end, but a quality of life that is beyond anything we can imagine. And not one that happens one day, but one that starts now and continues on. This is what Jesus brings. But here's where we see the intersection of Jesus with the brokenness, because this is the difficult thing. If you hop down just a few verses to verse 19, he says this, and this is the judgment. The light has come. And who's the light? Oh, come on, we can do better than that, church. Who's the light? Jesus. Jesus is the light. The light has come into the world, and people loved what? Darkness rather than light. And they do it because their works were evil. This is something that we all have to wrestle with. Coming to Jesus, you don't have to make yourself anything to be loved by Jesus, to have his forgiveness. In fact, you can't. It is freely offered, and there's nothing you can do to earn Christ's forgiveness, the salvation that is available through God. You can't earn it. But sometimes, and to get it, you have to accept it. You have to be willing to take it. The thing is, sometimes we're not willing to take that. We're not willing to take his cleansing, his healing, his forgiveness, his salvation, because I like being in the dark. Or quite frankly, I might not even like it, but I'm sure used to it. I don't know what I'm going to find out if I flip those lights on. I've been living in this cave, in this pit for so long. The idea of having the light, I mean, I couldn't even process what the world must look like. So I'm going to stay here in the dark. I'm committed to it. Remember, that word love, as the Bible tends to use, is way more of a willful decision than it is an emotion. So it's not like people are like, "Ooh, I love you, darkness. Ooh, ooh." That's not what's going on here. I'm committed to it. I'm gonna hold on to it. I'm committed to the darkness because it makes me feel safe, or I'm just used to it, or it's scary to think of what happens if I step into the light. And maybe it's even to this point, I don't even know if Jesus would like what he saw if I came into his light. Yeah, that sounds nice and good, but you don't understand me and all the stuff I've done while I've been in the dark, so I can't step in. Or maybe it was, well, I was in the light for a while, but then I stepped into the darkness. And I found out that it was easier to just stay there, and now I've been there so long, there's no way for me to really step out and be accepted again. There's no way Jesus could love me again when I stepped out of the light. What I want you to know is you do not understand that the light has come into the world and the darkness has not overcome it. Did you hear that, church? The light has come into the world and the darkness cannot overcome it. There is nothing that you've done. There's nothing that you are. There's nothing that can in any way overcome the light that is Jesus, and he offers it to you to step into. Whether stepping into it in that first way of being restored in relationship with God and having all of your sins for all time forgiven, or to step back into that partnership and fellowship with him. Maybe you've been there before and you walked away. There's nothing that you can do that can keep you out of the light now. And I would suggest this, kind of wrapping us up, that the existence of real beauty in our world, the existence of real beauty in the world exposes the nature of true ugliness. See, ugliness is not, wow, you're kind of repulsive looking. Ugliness is being determined to stay in the darkness. We shared a verse last week from Ecclesiastes where it says that he has made everything beautiful in its time. He's made everything beautiful in its time. The thing is, your beauty can be found in anyone and anything. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm trying to say in any way that something that is truly ugly, something that is truly dark and, antithetical to what God has revealed, that we should call that beautiful. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, yes, there is beauty in the world around us. There's beauty sitting in every seat in this room right now. And some of you have been told that you're not beautiful. It's a lie. You hear me? It is a lie. You are beautiful. You are a cherished creation of the Almighty God. And no matter what is on the outside, that beauty is meant to extend inward. Because we were made to be the real beautiful creations that are ultimately completely shown to be beautiful in Jesus. His light exposes and gets rid of all the darkness and shows us off in the beauty he's designed us. But it shows off where the ugliness is. And we have to ask some questions about, what am I going to do about the ugly places in my life? What am I going to do? Where am I hiding the light? Let me say it this way. How do we do this? How do we embrace beauty? How do we do it? Well, we embrace beauty, I think, in a whole lot of ways. And this is where that 2.5-hour sermon started really cropping up, because this list got longer and longer and longer and longer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you with 2 questions that I would love for you to uniquely wrestle with. Again, this could be over lunch, it could be at your life groups with other gatherings. But how do I embrace beauty? Well, ask this question. Am I calling something ugly that Jesus says is beautiful? Now, this could be someone else. This could be yourself. When you look in the mirror, do you see the beautiful, cherished creation that God has declared you to be and has made you to be? If you don't, you're calling ugly something that Jesus says is beautiful. But maybe you're doing that with someone else. Maybe it's because of how they look. Maybe it's because of something they've done to you. Maybe it's because of the color of their skin. Maybe it's their political leanings. Maybe they're in a rival church or rival faith. What are you looking at and calling ugly that God has called beautiful? If you're doing that, we need to switch that off and let light into that dark spot. But I'd say this too. Am I clinging to ugliness instead of pursuing beauty? I watch people run to the dark. I watch people run to the ugly. Something in our brokenness compels us to go to those places that maybe I've convinced myself I deserve it. Maybe, again, I'm just used to it. But we need to stop running to the darkness and run into the beautiful light. Light has come into this world, and the darkness has not overcome it. We have that light to step into now. Ask these questions, and maybe be vulnerable enough to have someone else ask you these questions and look you in the eyeball while you answer. And then you give them the freedom and say, hey, did I just lie to you? Because if they care about you, if they love you, they'll be honest with you. That's what I'm going to encourage you to do. Ask these questions, wrestle with these questions, and do the work of what it means to pursue beautiful things, because that's how God has made us. And guess what? You guys are all beautiful things.